This episode is brought to you by Strength Portal. You need a single software platform that enables your trainers to deliver consistent, high-quality workouts, track client progress, and scale your business. The problem is you're still using pen and paper or basic spreadsheets to run your business, which leads to poor client experiences, inaccurate tracking, and prevents you from growing your business, making you feel frustrated. Strength Portal understand your challenge and have worked closely with the HIIT industry to create a software platform to manage and scale your niche business. You can integrate with MindBody, manage a standardized exercise and workout library for your team, track workouts effectively, and produce client reports at the click of a button. Strength Portal is used by multiple businesses in the high-intensity strength training community, namely Discover Strength, Smart Strength Austin, MedX Precision Fitness, and more. Starting with Strength Portal is super simple. Number 1, sign up for the best package for your business. Number 2, let Strength Portal take the load off and help onboard your business onto the platform. And number 3, start delivering consistent workout experiences and scale your business to the next level. To help support the podcast, please go to strengthportal.com/high intensity business and sign up now so you can stop feeling frustrated about your business and start to scale your business to its true potential. Go to strengthportal.com/high intensity business. Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, the podcast where we discuss high-intensity strength training and provide you with the tools, the tactics, and strategies to help you grow your strength training business. If you would like a free sales presentation on aging and strength training to help you grow your business, you can go and get that over at highintensitybusiness.com. Today, this is episode 383, and I am joined by Michael Opalski to talk to you about ways to step out of your HIIT box for bodybuilding. Today's guest is obviously Michael Opalski. Mike, Fitness Hacker Opalski, is a speaker, author, coach, and co-founder of the Pure Physique Fitness franchise, along with his wife, Corey Beth, who's also been on the show. They help high performers and busy parents transform their bodies without calorie counting or cardio by combining their time-efficient resistance training with custom meal planning and mindset coaching. Mike is an international educator for personal trainers and was a professional natural bodybuilder, promoter, and judge. He and his wife are a faith-filled couple, proud parents of 2 young boys, and they have both been featured guests on numerous podcasts like this one and interviews about fitness, faith, personal growth, and relationships. Mike, great to be with you again.
So happy to be here, Lawrence.
Always enjoy our conversations and excited about today's topic. So I'll let you take it away and I'll just chime in with questions as we go, so that the focus here is ways to step out of the HIIT box for bodybuilding. I'm excited to hear what you have to say on this. Obviously, you're the expert in this space, so take it away.
Yeah, well, let me just start off by saying that, when we're talking about bodybuilding in this context, I want to be very clear with everybody that we're not necessarily speaking about having to build your body for the purpose of stepping on a bodybuilding stage or some type of fitness competition. The way that I view it is that we are all bodybuilders. And many of us got into this not only for the strength component, but because we did want to see some level of aesthetic improvement. And obviously, we know that resistance training is the path to get there. So I just wanted to preface all this just by saying that anybody who's listening to this right now, whose primary aim or one of their primary aims is to just simply improve their aesthetic outlook, then this is for you. What we're going to discuss today is focused on that specific goal. And I also want to help everybody hear that we all agree that there are genetic limits in this bodybuilding game. But often what pains me personally is that many hitters, especially, simply assume their limits instead of challenging them. So again, to just get on the same page again, just let me preface something before I start talking and get pushback from the purists or those who live according to Body by Science, which, by the way, I believe is possibly the most well put together and intelligently presented book on the topic of resistance training ever written. I've studied Doug McGuff's work since I started training 25 years ago, and he is an unrivaled mind on the topic, and many others, obviously. And I've also got tremendous respect for John Little's work and all he's done to push the intense, brief, and infrequent narrative as an author and a trainer. And, HIIT has been and continues to be the foundation of how I've trained myself and others during the last quarter century. High intensity is a great thing, but it's not everything. And that's probably more especially true when it comes to this topic of bodybuilding. And, I've said it many times before, we'd be ignorant to ignore the success of other people who have a different methodology. What we should be doing is looking at what they do and thinking about how we might borrow some from what it is that's helped make them successful. So today I wanted to talk about bodybuilding, and again, for the express purpose of just improving your aesthetics. And if we're going to go down this road, the first thing that has to happen is that we have to get unstuck from the dogmatic approach of just 1 to 2 workouts a week with an ever decreasing volume. All right. So that
one interjection very quickly. Let's just, I'm all good for covering this through the lens of the listener wants to, bodybuild, put on more muscle and focus on that. But let's also make sure we get across to the audience how this can be valuable for when they're educating their trainers on training clients who are really focused on this. And maybe not, like you said, we're all bodybuilders, sorry. We're not all looking to compete. So this is really applicable to almost every client. So let's just make sure we cover it for the audience is absolutely like dialed in, like, yes, I want to know how I can break through my genetic limits. But also they're going to be listening and think, how can I improve the personal training operation as well?
Cool. So let me
sorry to butt in.
No, that's fine. So let me just back up that last part, and I'll just, because I'm going to transition to that definitely.
Yeah.
But let me just put that a little bit more up front. All right. So today I wanted to talk about bodybuilding, or training for the express purpose of aesthetics, not just for yourself, but obviously for the clients that you may be seeing who are coming in with that as their primary objective. And so if we're going to go down this road, one of the first things that we have to do is get unstuck from maybe the dogmatic approach of just 1 to 2 workouts a week with an ever decreasing volume. And although that is a huge selling point, especially to clients who might not be, wanting to train frequently, it's just helping them to understand that, hey, for your expressed goal, we may need to make alterations from time to time. So what we have to do is sort of just delineate from what is the typical, what is the normal, what is best for long-term sustainability, and then what might be best for just this period of time in order to help you make these tweaks that may push your aesthetic improvement just a little bit further ahead. And so let me just also justify this statement by sharing a little bit of a background on myself. When I first got started with resistance training, I started off just the same way that probably many here did, which is with the high volume, high frequency routines that left me with chronic injuries. And although I was training, multiple days a week for 5+ hours a week, I still had a gut. And so when I finally got into high intensity training, that was the time that I began as a personal trainer. And I also made the decision at that time that I was going to start to compete in bodybuilding. And so I knew that so much of what needed to change was on the nutritional side. And so I made those changes, was able to move myself to this place where I felt comfortable getting on a bodybuilding stage, was competing at a relatively high level, even on the amateur side. And all that time I was implementing high intensity training. And at that time, my training consisted of 3 workouts a week, full body workouts. It was very much the Nautilus model for training. And I felt great about what I was doing. But as I continued to progress in high intensity training and got to have some great mentors, particularly on the super slow side, and started getting deeper and deeper into some of what Menser was preaching at that time, which was, again, this ever decreasing volume and frequency so that you can maintain greater strength. What I noticed was that with regards to the nutrition staying the same, I actually noticed a deterioration in my physique. I mean, it was noticeable as I went from training 3 times a week down to 2 times a week, and then eventually to, once every 4 to 5 days. There was a significant difference. And that sort of set off some alarms for me, because if you're going to compete in bodybuilding, it's all about aesthetics. It's all about maintaining as much muscle mass as you possibly can. And what I was noticing was that with my workouts that consisted of 4 exercises being done once every 5 days or so, I was not maintaining the same level of muscularity. I was not looking as tight and as fit as I really needed to. And that was concerning to me, because during this time, the weight loads still kept going up. I was continuing to improve in that department of strength, but noticing that the physique wasn't following. And that's sort of when I got involved with the IART and started speaking with other fitness clinicians, conversating with Brian Johnston and other people who were noticing something very similar. Because at that time, especially, a lot of those who were involved with the IART really were in it for the focus of bodybuilding, again, from this broader standpoint. And so we started to explore, what could be the reason, and more importantly, what needs to change.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second here, because I know people are thinking it. I'm always curious about how like the kind of mind can play tricks on us. And I know I was literally just talking to a client in our studio earlier today, or like an hour ago, and talking about the importance of how you feel and the pump of a workout. And that's what I quite like about working out frequently, is getting that acute feeling, that acute pump in the muscle. And I'm not saying that you are falling for this necessarily, Mike, but I am curious. I know how it feels when you're training like once every 10 days, when you do that kind of unintended, I will say, body by science approach of really stretching out your recovery. I don't think that's necessarily what Doug and John intended for the reader indefinitely, right? It was more of a kind of a temporary thing, right? You do. For me, from my perspective, I did feel like I was missing out. I was because you're not doing something, because you're not working, that physique is changing. But I wonder if I actually look at the data, in terms of my body composition, maybe it was going unchanged. So it was kind of just in my mind. Was it a feeling, or did you actually see, were you able to track the changes? Could you see in your physique, your amount of lean tissue, or was it more of or did you feel confident that just looking at yourself day in, day out, you're like, no, I am actually looking less muscular? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you were able to distinguish between that and just that transient feeling you get post-workout by training more frequently, if that makes sense?
No, it makes total sense. So at the time, I was doing 2 things. I was recording body composition, but it was through very archaic means.
Caliper situation.
So exactly. So, I mean, listen, we are going back, about 20 plus years now that this experience was taking place. So at the time, I did not have access to any really good body composition testing tools. However, as a bodybuilder, the most important thing you could utilize is photos. And so I was taking photos consistently throughout this journey, comparing and contrasting. And then, of course, yes, there is the subjective, how do I feel? How do I look when I'm viewing myself in the mirror? But it was noticeable. And it wasn't even just noticeable for me. When I was implementing the same practice with clients, I had a number of them note to me, I feel like I don't look as good as when we used to, and then would refer back to our 3 weekly workouts. versus doing our consolidation routine. And so it wasn't just from my vantage point, it was also what other people, other clients specifically of mine were experiencing. And then also to get the feedback from others who were in a similar situation, what they experienced as well. So again, it's not a knock on super slow. It wasn't a knock on consolidation training, because I do believe all of it has its place. But I think that is oftentimes where sometimes us as, high intensity training practitioners, as high intensity training enthusiasts, we get stuck in this box of thinking, well, it should always be this linear type of, progression where it's, hey, just train this many days a week, be super conservative and just work on your strength. And, eventually you're going to hit your genetic limits. But how do you really know you're hitting your genetic limits if you're not actually pushing your limits? If you're not exploring the possibility that there could be a little bit more to this? And, that sort of goes into the realm of, one of the things that we oftentimes teach through the IRT is looking at everything through this model of overreaching and overtraining, and understanding that it is a delicate balance. We know that in order to improve, we have to go beyond the norm. We have to. In fact, when all of us made our initial gains, it was because we went from not training to doing something that was completely unusual to us, which was training. And because of how unusual that was, our body was forced to adapt. Yet at the same time, we know that if we do too much for too long, that we could go down this road of overtraining. But as I said, I think many times people are too afraid to kind of push that limit and actually use overreaching as a tool to help them break through some plateaus, to make some new gains, to create some new adaptations, even if it's just an improvement in metabolic conditioning. But to do that and then understand that you can cycle back, you can step back to what should be your standard longer term approach to training.
Yeah, love it. You're making me think of Sean, my business partner, if he's listening to this, which he just might. He's very into, I guess, the Body by Science approach right now, which is great. And he trains super hard, and he's frankly one of the most intense people I've seen in the studio. But when it comes to training each other or suggesting he does a training with myself and our trainer, if it hasn't been enough days of recovery, it's potentially not a possibility, Mike. Whereas I'm so much more liberal about my training these days. Like, I've been looking into doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Because I'm thinking I need to learn how to do some sort of self-defense, otherwise I'm totally useless. And, before I would have looked at their kind of, schedule and seen, oh, there's push-ups and things. I won't do it because I don't want to overtrain. Oh, if I only train 2 days before, I don't think about it like that anymore. I like you're kind of getting at. I sort of listen to my body, and I know I can overreach for a certain amount of time. And yeah, maybe there'll come a week where I particularly stressful week because of all the factors that contribute to stress, which we know is everything, right? Life, emotional, work, etc. Then you can pull back and you can reduce the frequency for a short amount of time and then boost it back up again. But anyway, so no, I love what you're saying. It's really interesting.
So I think that for many hitters, and especially those who are trainers, if you are going to explore this, if you're going to go down this path, I mean, what's going to scare many of them, especially from a personal training side and doing this with clients, is that they're not going to be able to micromanage strength performance as well. And I say performance because, again, the micro increases that we might have in weight load, or that we're having a client increase by their 2.5, maybe 5 pounds, they really don't contribute all that much in terms of muscle mass. I mean, it usually, especially beyond, a person's initial training, let's say that first year of training, more and more of those improvements are going to come in the form of neuromuscular proficiency. So they are getting better and better at performing the exercises. They are seeing these micro improvements in terms of weight load, yet we're not seeing a dramatic change in their body composition, or at least like a 1-for-1 trade-off. I increased by 2.5 pounds and I noticed, I'm up a half a pound in muscle, in lean mass, right? When I tested my bod pod. Yeah.
The amount my chest press has gone up in the last year, Mike, like I'd be just massive right now.
Yeah. But you think about it, I mean, listen, this is what seasoned power lifters have been doing forever, right? I mean, if when most of us think of power lifters, we just think of the big heavyweights. But the fact is that there's weight classes, and you have power lifters who are in the lower weight classes who have stayed in that weight class for years, sometimes decades, and yet have seen massive improvements in terms of the amount of load that they can lift. Yet if they can lift that much significantly more load, shouldn't they be that significantly more muscular and in turn heavier, right? But you don't often see that. So that's why sometimes, even though I do absolutely agree with tracking weight load and strength gains, when a person's beyond the first couple of years of their training, and now they're really trying to seek to maximize their muscle mass, a lot of those incremental increases in load are not going to do all that much, for the simple fact that the way in which you were able to make those increases in the beginning was just because, again, the unusual nature of the stress your body was presented with. It wasn't because you were lifting a certain amount of weight or you were exposed to a certain amount of weight. It was the unusual nature, that disruption in homeostasis, that really triggered your body to have to put on muscle. And, there is definitely a diminishing returns as it pertains to increasing loads and muscle hypertrophy, right? Like we know, like we just said, you're not going to infinitely keep increasing your strength, and you're not going to infinitely increase your muscle hypertrophy. But that's why I believe it becomes important to start thinking about that goal specifically of muscle hypertrophy from a different angle than just the typical, single or double progression. And a lot of this is because there's going to come a day when you can no longer lift any heavier. Right? There's going to come a day. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I reached that day probably about a decade ago. I'm not going to gain any more strength on a lot of these exercises. But we also know that muscle hypertrophy isn't entirely weight load dependent. In fact, I would argue that I probably made some of my personal best gains during my bodybuilding years when I wasn't lifting as heavy as I had been just years earlier. And some of that is, again, because of better planning, better programming, better understanding of rest and recovery. But the point being, I wasn't lifting as heavy, yet I was seeing improvements. And I could say the same for probably many others. And I believe that should give people hope that they can still improve their musculature even in the face of stagnant strength. But doing so is going to be all about being able to balance stress and recovery. And that, to me, is the most important aspect of this.
That's like music to the ears of so many people listening to this who just won't give in to their genetic limits. I'm thinking of Richard Chartrand in particular, who I admire so much because he's always questioning that and challenging that. And if he listens to this one, I think he might be, even though he's definitely, I would say, towards the purist side of the HIIT camp. I don't think he'll mind me saying that. He'd still like what the spirit of what you're saying. This episode is brought to you by Strength Portal. You need a software platform that enables you to track workouts, deliver consistent high-quality client experiences, and scale your business. The problem is you're still using pen and paper or basic spreadsheets to run your business, which leads to inconsistent workout experiences and stifles your business growth, making you feel frustrated. Strength Portal have worked closely with the HIIT industry to create a software platform to manage and scale your niche business. Strength Portal is used by multiple businesses in the high-intensity strength training community, namely Discover Strength, Smart Strength Austin, MedX Precision Fitness, and more. To help support the podcast, go to strengthportal.com/high-intensity business and sign up for your ideal package now. That's strengthportal.com/high-intensity business. And now back to the episode.
Let's go. So Lawrence, let me ask you a question. If you had to add 4 to 5 pounds of muscle in a month, would you really train only 4 times in that month, or would you consider doing something a little bit different?
I'd be very open-minded, Mike.
Okay. Well, that's great because, I feel that for a lot of people, just really for a moment, let that question sit there. Let that question actually sit there and ruminate on it. If you had to, or you had to get a client to gain 4 to 5 pounds of muscle in a month, would you really do everything that you do right now that's built mainly for long-term success and consistency, or would you consider doing something different? And I bring this up because I remember once this question was posed to me on the strength side. It was, if you had to add 30 pounds to your squat over the course of the next month, would you really only train once a week? And of course, we get into the weeds here with regards to, practice and learning and skill. But, the general concept still remains the same. You recognize that, hey, if I have a limited period of time to get something done, first of all, I am more capable of putting more forth because it's a short period of time. But also, in many ways, it's a necessity because I don't have time to waste. And I love that our community at large, has this long-term focus. And I love the fact that for most of us HIIT practitioners, we have clients who have literally been with us for decades because the workout works. And it actually works into people's lifestyle. So we don't have the crash and burn syndrome that a lot of other trainers or type of fitness programs have, where people are going hardcore, but then there's no drop off from that. It's always 1,000% all the time, and people can't maintain that volume, that frequency, or that maybe intensity at a consistent rate. So just look at one of our favorite things as hitters to look at, which is the Colorado experiment, as well as the recreation of it recently by the STG guys up in Canada. In those results is one of the main concepts that first attracted me to the IRT, and is something that we have never and will never stop teaching, which is this broader view of that stress recovery model. And you see in the Colorado experiment, as well as Petrella's, recreation of it, you see a very short period of time, right? 30 days in which a greater amount of demands, greater than anyone's body is typically accustomed to, but just for those 30 days, right? And you think about how unique that training was to everybody involved, right? The integration of more negative work and the increased frequency of training. And yeah, of course, nutrition plays a role in this as well. But at the end of the day, you require the stimulus that the nutrition is feeding. And so it's the same exact concept in many ways. What we want to ask ourselves is, hold on, what could I do in a shorter period of time that would potentially make a difference in moving this needle in terms of my muscle development? Now, I'm not going to talk about strength development. I want to keep this in the realm of muscle development. So I have some practical application type things that people could do. So if you are thinking about doing this for yourself, if you have a client who is maybe interested in adding a little bit more muscle, here's some things that you could actually get started with. The first thing to do would be to take inventory on what's currently being done for yourself or your clients. And for most hitters, should be pretty simple because you're probably doing, a workout that falls in the realm of 30 minutes or less. You're probably not doing it any more than 3 times a week. And you probably have a pretty standardized program for the most part. But what you want to consider is, what is your typical volume per muscle group each week? What about the total volume per muscle group each week? What is your frequency of training each muscle group or your training in general? What advanced methods are you employing? Do you use drop sets, supersets, negatives? What cadence do you mostly employ? And also, what training tools do you use? Are you exclusively machines, exclusively free weights because you're training from home? I mean, all of these things are what we want to take into consideration. And once we've taken inventory, it's time to make some decisions on which variables we're going to change and to what degree. So for the person who's conditioned themselves to believe anything above this minimum effective dose is an unnecessary excess that's only going to result in wear and tear on the body. I mean, this part will probably make them sweat more than and their heart rate's going to probably run higher than doing like a set of leg presses to failure, right? But because the purpose here is to intelligently create a program, not just a single workout, that generally exceeds what they've conditioned themselves to. So we take all of these things into consideration and we say, okay, now we're going to start focusing on what I can manipulate in order to try to move this needle. And so the goal here is really simple. The goal is to purposely push the boundaries of what our muscles are routinely exposed to. So we're not looking for that minor disruption in homeostasis. I mean, I cited before the incremental increases in weight. Yes, those can be a disruption to homeostasis, but it's minor. And it's what the body is, it's closely related to what the body is accustomed to anyway. So we're looking for that major disruption, the likes of which we've maybe never been exposed to before, or maybe it's been decades since we've been exposed to it. And, as bro science as this may sound, it really is a grow or die scenario that we're chasing here. So since we're not ancestral hunters or gatherers, and protein availability is not an issue, I mean, we can really push the envelope on muscle protein synthesis during this period of higher demands. I mean, that is one of the primary objectives for or the arguments, I would say, on the side of the high volume or high frequency crowd is, hey, by me training more frequently, I get to push muscle protein synthesis to a more frequent basis. And since I have no problem consuming mass amounts of protein, like, I want to take advantage of that. So we're always looking at what others do and considering, what may be applicable to us, maybe not all the time, but in these isolated situations. So with that inventory in hand, now what we're going to do is we want to think about maybe doubling or tripling our weekly volume per muscle group, maybe even 10xing it for the, one set per muscle group consolidation workout crowd. And to accomplish that, I mean, we'll have to up our weekly frequency from maybe 1 to 3 workouts a week to 4 to 5 workouts, and potentially following some type of split. In fact, most likely you would have to transition to some type of split. And even with this dramatic of an increase in volume and frequency, you should still consider employing advanced methods, but they should not be the ones that you typically use. So that's why when we're taking that inventory, we are looking at what are some of these intensity or advanced methods that I typically employ for myself or for my clients. And it's time to explore what else you could do. I mean, for many of us in the IRT, this came about with zone training. It was one thing to up the volume, to, implement some different split routine. But it was zone training, which was dramatically different from what any of us had been doing before. And for me particularly, I mean, like, I noticed a significant improvement within the first couple of weeks of doing it. Others had far more dramatic results than myself with it. And with all of this, I mean, I should say that, yes, of course, your individual potential is going to play a huge role in how successful or not successful you are with this, which I think also, if you're not successful with it, it's still a good thing, because at least now you learn that, hey, I really, even if I do push the limits, even if I do try to employ all of these other variables, it still doesn't work as well as, just me going at the, steady Eddie type of pace. And that's great. But I think that, it would behoove us to not take this chance to see for ourselves or for our clients if we could just push those limits just a little bit more. Aside from that, I mean, I would say consider using different cadences to what you're accustomed to, but obviously within reason. If you are typically a super slow trainee, or that's how you train your clients, maybe you're going from that 10-5 or that 10-10 down to a controllable 3-3, which would then allow for more contractions in the same unit of time. So there are a lot of variables here that we could manipulate. If you train exclusively with machines, maybe you want to consider doing your workout with nothing but free weights during this period of time. There is obviously very much a novelty factor to all of this. And as I made mention before, what will drive some people absolutely bonkers is the fact that they can't micromanage all of this, and they might not be able to pinpoint that exact variable that that took them over the top. But in many ways, that's okay. Like, we're not here to figure out what the single variable is. We're just here to see from a big picture point of view, hey, can we do something that's so different that would help me to amass a little bit more muscle?
Quick question, because you say you're not, this is through the lens of focused on muscle hypertrophy. You're not necessarily too worried about strength improvements, and some of that could just be, a lot of the time, could be noise, I guess. When you do see, let's say, curious to know how you would manage and track each workout, but when you say someone does, like you say, they do barbell bench press for the first time, having done Nautilus chest press for ages, they're doing completely different cadence, completely different advanced techniques, and it's that they get one less rep like the next workout, or two, and then one less than the following, and it's almost going down, and maybe that's due to loads of other factors, right? Would you be looking at any point to address that in terms of lower frequency or a change in programming? Or are you, during as you call it, maybe this is a blitz, I don't know if I'm getting the terminology right, but during this kind of intense high frequency program, are you being a little less concerned about fluctuations in performance from workout to workout? Is that correct?
No, that is correct. And going again, along with the not being able to micromanage increases in strength, I mean, would not even be totally concerned about tracking the workouts at all, outside of just having a general layout. Because using your example of the bench press, in 2 consecutive weeks of doing that exercise, chances are I would not even be doing them in the same order. I'm not looking to repeat the same workouts over and over. I am literally looking at each exercise as just a potential point of stimulation. And if you're looking at it through that lens, as I said, it's a broader viewpoint of all this. What we're really after is a certain amount of stress, a certain amount of demands being placed on our body. But the order in which those demands are placed upon our muscles really doesn't make much of a difference. And I know that even the research points to exercise order doesn't necessarily play a huge role as much as we thought it did in terms of muscle hypertrophy or strength gains. So in answering your question, no, I am not concerned that, even if I did the bench press, let's say is my first exercise, like most trainees across the world do on every Monday, right?
Of course,
it's National Bench Press Monday. and so, they can look at that. I mean, if that's what you do week to week, hey, great. Then you should know that I'm not maybe fully recovered. Maybe I've been, overstressed for a variety of different reasons and scale back. But in this short period of time, we are not going to get overly concerned about fluctuations in strength or an inability to lift as much as we typically do for the same amount of time.
Okay, so, cool. I like this idea of minimalist tracking. It's I'm always a bit of a sucker for, well, that's the wrong word. I always get drawn to simplicity in these sorts of things. So as a business, if you're delivering this type of service and you're doing much more of a kind of minimalist, higher level kind of tracking method, that's quite appealing.
Well, not to get off topic, but that's exactly how we've grown our group resistance training.
I thought so much. Yeah. Okay.
It's more about program design and, again, providing a consistent stimulus versus micromanaging some of the details. Because
Understood.
when you have a group of people, which could be a different group each week, meaning same time, but different group of people, you don't always get to start people at the same place. People are starting in different orders, so to speak, based on the workout design for that day. So we don't get concerned about what somebody's actual weight is. We just know that we have to be in a range. And if it's in that range in which they will reach that point of momentary muscular fatigue in the given time for that set, well, then we're good with that. It's providing the stimulus, and then we're just looking at, we're taking a total view of everything. And that's a lot of how I like to personally approach my training, along with, the training of clients. I like to take that broader view of, hey, what are the total training demands? I mean, and we look at the total demands of a workout, we are considering weight load, we're considering time under tension, we're considering whatever advanced variables you're using. We're looking at frequency and volume, like all of these things, overload, all of it together comprises your total demands. So in this discussion that we're having, the only thing we're looking to do for maybe 2 weeks or maybe upwards of 4 weeks, I probably would not go any longer than that. But in that time frame, we're just simply saying, hey, if these are your total demands typically, because we took inventory, right? And based on that inventory, we have a sense for ourselves or for our clients of how well their body handles those demands. We're going to say, let's up those. Like, let's really up the ante on these training demands. And you could do it through any of the methods that I already mentioned, increasing, your frequency, increase your volume, changing over to different equipment that you're accustomed to, utilizing different advanced techniques that you maybe have never employed. I mean, all of those are going to create an environment, a unique environment of training demands. And that's all we're testing here is we are testing to see what we can manipulate in order to make things just a little bit different, or I should say a lot different from what we normally do.
And you're saying that typically if you have someone do this type of approach, they'll do it for like a maximum of a month. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, let's be intelligent about this, right? We're always looking at everything from this stress recovery continuum. And the point is that, yes, you are going to create an excessive amount of stress compared to what you normally do, but you also have to make sure that there is more than enough recovery on the back end of this and that you are, just in essence, being smart about your programming. This is not the bro science, like, hey, let's just throw everything at the wall and hope something sticks. It's just saying, over the course of, let's say, a year, let's take 1 year of your training. Mm-hmm. And if in 1 year of that training, there was a 2 to 4 week period where you just had a significant increase in these demands, over the long run, is that significant increase going to totally deteriorate your progress for the rest of the year? Chances are it won't, unless you are, probably in your 60s, 70s. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. But that's sort of how we want to take a step back and look at this, is through that lens. And also, too, we do want to, as I mentioned, add a little bit more recovery on the back end. So maybe you have this 2 week, 4 week period, but then you're taking a full 1 week off, or possibly 2 weeks off. And now just allowing for your body to overcompensate for that stress you just placed on it. Many times in the past, when I've done this with clients or myself, there's been at least one entire week taken off from training, none at all. And then even upon returning, they may have been lesser demands. So going back to the normal routine, but still cutting everything shy of failure for maybe, the majority of exercises. But it's all about just simply balancing training demands with recovery ability and just looking at it from a larger perspective.
And would you see someone potentially doing this approach a few times a year?
I would probably caution against it, just for the reason that if you truly did push the limits of this, there's a psychological component to this. And we haven't even discussed this, but in terms of how I would typically present this to somebody is, by the time you're done with this routine, you should never, ever want to do anything like this ever again. I mean, a lot of people feel that way about HIIT in general sometimes, but this is kind of taking it to that next level. And I remember one of the first times that I ever did a blitz. So you referred to it earlier. The IRT, Brian Johnson, had developed this blitz concept. And I remember putting together that routine, and by the end going, yeah, I have no desire to do that again. I think at that time I actually did take notes on what I was doing. And by week 2, the notes got thrown away. I was like, well, this is pointless, because, everything was always different workout to workout. No two stimuluses were the same, with meaning from the totality standpoint of each workout. But yeah, by the time you're done, I mean, you should feel as though you don't want to do this ever again. I mean, think of a Navy SEAL. Nobody ever wants to go through BUDS training ever again. But by going through that, it sets them up for long-term success. Not just physically, but probably even more psychologically. And I would argue to the individual who might say, well, you could do this, but, it's not gonna make a difference. Or what if it doesn't make a difference in how much more muscle you put on? I guarantee it'll make a difference psychologically, because you pushed yourself to a new level. And what repercussion might that have on your regular weekly training routines? Your ability to know that, hey, I can push myself a little bit more. And so I think that there is definitely more than just the muscle hypertrophy component as a potential positive effect of this, but there's most definitely, unequivocally, going to be some type of psychological benefit tied to it.
Yeah, well, like, people don't realize what they're perhaps capable of as one of those outcomes in terms of the psychological. I
think that's one of the biggest ones, is that, hey, sometimes you just need to challenge yourself, just to know that you can challenge yourself.
Yeah.
Just to know that there's a little bit more left in the tank.
It's funny when you said you'd be describing it to someone and you'd say you will never want to do this ever again. I think like most of our colleagues would be like, where do I sign? Like that's like the ultimate sales pitch right there. So great, thanks for that, Mike. So obviously you've gone through a lot of stuff there in terms of how you take the inventory of their existing training protocol so that you can change things up as much as possible. Feel free to cut me off here and carry on with your own agenda on this, but I am curious because I know that this type of style is almost like that every workout's different in so many different ways. But surely from a trainer's point of view, you still have to have a rough plan for the client, right? Even though you're not tracking everything. So maybe we don't have time on this one podcast to actually create a plan. Maybe you could send me after this an example plan we could put in the show notes or something like that. I know obviously there's plans, lots of plans, or at least ideas for plans provided in the IART, which obviously we're going to talk about. But just, something I want, maybe if you can touch on during this podcast or send me after the fact, that could be really helpful for people. Just so if people are like, you know what, I want to do this with X client, or I want to do this with myself for like 4 weeks. What's the plan, right?
Yeah, well, I think we can go into that right now.
Cool.
The plan, first of all, yes, we should always go into it with a plan, with an idea of, we take that inventory so that we can then calculate, okay, how much time investment is going to be necessary to do this. For us individually, that's less of a concern. For a client, it's definitely a concern. They may not be as available to train as frequently as a program that we design. And I also want to be mindful of, our colleagues who say, hey, my program is built around this much time available for working out, no longer than that. I have appointments coming in afterwards, and I totally understand and respect that. So when I have personally done this with clients, I did not change the amount of time I was providing a client, but I did change their frequency. So frequency played a much larger role in this, because for many, they were going from 2 workouts a week to 4 to 5 workouts a week. But what it meant was we were implementing split routines so that we can, in taking that inventory, we can make sure that maybe if we weren't hitting the ideal amount of volume that we were after, we were getting pretty darn close. So yes, I always say the inventory is the first most important step, because from there, the first thing that I'm going to look at is volume. I think that is, if we look at all of these factors as just, dials on a board, we're just looking to see, how much we can crank up each one of those dials. So for the high intensity practitioner, you might not be able to dial up the volume as much. So then maybe you have to just put a little bit more emphasis on that frequency dial or that advanced technique dial and build your routine around that. But here's what I'll say. You go into it with a general plan of, this is what I would like to accomplish for this individual over the course of the next 2 weeks. And you're going to start that plan, and chances are you may find yourself having to abandon that plan a week later, because we can't predict in this unpredictable environment that we're creating. We can't reasonably predict how somebody's going to respond, And so we do have to be mindful, even though I'm not saying that you necessarily dial back the demands if it seems like the demands are too great. In fact, I'm going to say the exact opposite. I'm going to say you should probably be charging forward and through that in the face of it. But the point being is that, you want to have an idea of total volume, total frequency, advanced methods, and then everything after that, you can always adjust on the fly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So where do we go from here? I've got some other questions, but I could save those for later.
No, go ahead. Ask away.
Yeah, I'm also curious. Now, we've talked a little bit about examples of protocol, exercises, technique. How, can you give us a view on, so let's say you've got a customer, right? Let's say they train twice a week with you currently. They're a busy professional, let's say, but they are really keen on optimizing or increasing muscle mass. And they say, look, I can give more time. I can train 4 times a week, whatever. How do you like price and package this, just out of interest? Because this, obviously, the amount of frequency and time could differ for each client unless you've already got this sort of packaged in your service offer. So I'm curious how you do that within Pure Physique, or what's the best way to do that? Yeah.
Personally, we never change our pricing based on this. Just somebody would wind up purchasing more frequently. I mean, that's the only difference. So if they typically purchase, an 8-session package each month, well, they're going to probably go through that package in the first 2 weeks, and they're purchasing another one after that. I think that, each business owner would have to consider what's best for his or her business. Could you consider, lowering the rate for a period like this? Could you create a program built specifically around this that has its own price point to not interfere with people's frequency? So thinking of it more from the standpoint of a bolt-on program versus, again, just part of their regular training. But for us, I mean, we don't really change anything. Most of our clients do train on average about 2.5 times per week. That, going through our full list, it's about 2.5 times per week. So for some clients, going from their 2 workouts per week to four workouts in a week for a short period of time is not a major disruption to their training package or anything like that. However, the way that we personally have our program structured, and I know I've talked about this on your podcast before and on others, I mean, we change over to a different training style, if you will, every 2 weeks. So our program is never, just the typical run them through the circuit and just keep measuring strength performance on these particular set of exercises done in this method. Ours is always changing, where we're manipulating typically not necessarily the volume, unless it's because we changed the length of each set. At the end of the day, all our workouts wind up taking 30 minutes, but we may be manipulating performance. So it could be a workout routine in which, I'll use our double sets workout, right? Which is a very basic fundamental routine in our eyes, which is just simply, it's 2 sets for every exercise, but we're constantly alternating between an upper and a lower body exercise. So think, row to leg curl, back to row, back to leg curl, boom, and then moving on to the next pair of exercises. And nice. For us, by doing it that way, again, it allows us to make sure in this, especially in the group environment, it allows us to make sure that we are getting people to the degree of fatigue, the degree of intensity that we ideally would like to see them at. But shortly after doing a double sets workout, we may be transitioning the next 2 weeks to nothing but zone training. And so now for us, I mean, we don't have to implement things like what we've been discussing today because it's sort of built into our programming anyway. The only difference would really be for a lot of our clients is just upping that frequency. And, we don't have many that do, but occasionally we do have a few clients here and there. We're like, hey, I have this thing coming up. And, I'm going to also be gone for 2 or 3 weeks once I go off to this thing. So in most cases, it's a vacation. Mm-hmm. So for them to step up that, that frequency of training is a non-issue, because we know they're going to get all the recovery they need on the back end, but it gives them personally a nice run up to that event.
And helps you protect cash flow too, which is great.
Correct.
I know it's not popular to say that, but hey, we're all running businesses here. Yeah.
It's a big part of business. I mean, we've listened to colleagues who gone about it in many different ways in terms of having, ongoing monthly charges on clients' credit cards, whether they're in the studio or not, and maybe they have a pool of sessions that they're pulling from, and each monthly, EFT is the same, and that's great. If that works for your business, awesome. But I think that, this also is one of those opportunities to have people move through, a training package at a faster rate, but not getting away from, the core concept of what we're trying to do for them, or what we as high intensity training practitioners preach, So
I'm thinking how we would do this in our business, and I don't know. I mean, maybe we get different clients to you, Mike, but I don't know of anyone who would come in with a real obsession with muscle hypertrophy yet, to be honest. But I'm just thinking, how we would do that. And I guess it's kind of straightforward. If someone's on, let's say, 8 times a month training twice a week, and we figure out that they could do 4 times a week short term, then we just purchase 2 of those contracts, and they're month to month contracts. So just purchase 2 and then just terminate one of them at the end of the month. And there you go. Simple as that, right? So you don't necessarily need to. I'm thinking about, how the listeners who are using something like MindBody. So that's how I would do it in MindBody. How they would create the contract and the pricing and all of that in mind. But I think at the beginning, when doing this, if there's something that you want to implement or experiment in your business, you just keep it really simple and just do something like that, right?
I would do something like that, but also keep something else in mind. Again, a period of stress followed by a period of recovery. So using your example of the person who is purchasing their 8 training session package, we're not necessarily saying that they're going to need 2 training packages in that month, because they may run through all 8 sessions within the first 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. But now you're intentionally building in on the back end a longer recovery period. So maybe that recovery period could be 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And so now it just it's just taking the same amount of what they normally do, but just structuring it differently. Looking at it, instead of spreading 8 workouts over the course of a month, could it be beneficial? I don't have the answer, but could it be beneficial to compounding all that stress into 2 weeks?
Got it.
And then providing more recovery time on the back end. And I know that there are some trainers out there. I just, have heard of a few who said, hey, when I started doing blitzes and stuff, I actually found that this actually works well for me. I like compounding all that stress into a short period of time. For many, it's 3 weeks on, 1 week off, right? Okay. Which, again, is reasonable, because if you are that person who's doing 3 workouts in a week, well, that's still only 9 training sessions in a week. In a month, compared to 8 if you're going 2 times per week. Mm-hmm. But you're also getting a full week off for your body to fully recuperate. And that's usually where a lot of people, I feel, even in high intensity training, even with our reduced frequency of, say, 2 workouts a week, once we start considering all the other stressors that we encounter in life, or any number of things that could really disrupt our ability to recover from a workout. Even our minimal 2 workouts a week could still result in us reaching a point of compounded stress that we're compensating for it because we're able to go in and perform at similar levels as we had in previous workouts, but we haven't quite overcompensated for it to the extent that, now I'm seeing the improvement in my strength, or, I'm feeling a difference in my energy levels and my functional ability. So that's, again, broader view, it all comes down to stress and recovery.
Yeah. Now you've got me thinking, actually, probably might even be better to do it more granular and actually have a single session option in your in your pricing, even if you don't advertise it, which we don't. And a whole debate I've been starting in the membership around, should we be selling single sessions or just monthly memberships? Because we've started to do it, for special circumstances, but we don't advertise it as an offer, if that makes sense. Yeah. But I'm just thinking, sorry, I know this is not going off topic a little bit, but I'm just thinking, if you had someone who did want to, again, compress a lot of sessions in 1 week, or do a ton of sessions over a single month, maybe just have that single session option, and then just obviously adjust the quantity for that particular customer. I think that's probably, people are probably listening to this going, well, yeah, Lawrence, obviously that's how you do it,
It probably is the simplest way to go about it.
Yeah. But I've not done it before. So I guess I'm thinking it through how we would potentially do it. Awesome. Thank you for that, Mike. So let's see here. So I was just going to ask you, a few minutes left here before we start wrapping up. I just wanted to know, can you talk about clients you've got who you've done this with in terms of this blitz type short-term approach? And I'd love to hear success stories or results or feedback you've had from this kind of stuff.
So the main circumstances in which I've personally used this with clients were some of whom were actually competing. So they were in preparation for whether it was natural bodybuilding or a physique competition of some sort. I would typically implement it with them, and normally we would structure it just a little further out from their competition. And it's also can be used as a means of just simply depleting more glycogen, right? Putting your body into a state of glycogen supercompensation, and so that this way a lot of the aesthetic improvement may just be overcompensation of glycogen, or supercompensation of glycogen inside the muscle cells, right? So to provide a little bit more muscle fullness. So I've used it mainly in those circumstances. Again, going back to when I was using it most frequently, we did not necessarily have great means of measuring lean body mass at that time. So we were mainly relying upon, visual representation to determine, okay, was this worthwhile? I can tell you that for me personally, when I did have a means of measuring it, my increase was negligible. It wasn't a tremendous amount. I wasn't expecting to, put on 4 or 6 pounds of muscle. I know there were some individuals in the IRT who did. I fell more in the 1.5 pound increase range, which I was still totally okay with that at the time. But yeah, it would normally be used in that circumstance, or what I had made mention of earlier. We'd use it in a circumstance where somebody had some type of event coming up. So normally it was, I have a wedding around the corner. I have a vacation I want to go on. I want to look my best for that event. And those were the most typical circumstances in which I would utilize this with clients. And I say with clients because, like many of us here, my goal is long-term adherence, and it is to keep people coming back on a consistent basis. So I am, as much as I love doing this and talking about this and implementing this personally, from a business standpoint, I also recognize it's not going to be something that you can do frequently. You're not going to probably have a whole lot of people who want to do it, but for those that do, it definitely can work. And it's if nothing else, it breaks up the monotony. It allows for experimentation. You get to see, put this up against what you typically do with somebody and see, hey, what kind of result does this person get in 1 month training this way versus that. Of course, individual differences apply, but you get what I'm saying. It just gives you that opportunity to kind of assess what it is that you're doing and question it and challenge it. But I don't want to, go off on a tangent, but yeah, regarding, who I personally used this with, it had been a very limited number of clients, and it was typically under those particular set of circumstances.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just thinking, even if a lot of us perhaps, again, don't have only a very small number of people who this might apply to, there's still elements of what you're saying that apply. I mean, just I like the idea of, creating a lot of novelty through changing every variable: volume, frequency, movement speed, or cadence, advanced techniques, advanced methods, um, and using more of a, I guess I can see how this can work really well in a group setting where, you know, people are still paying for supervision, but it's difficult to give the same granular level of tracking that you would on one-on-one. So this blends quite well with group, obviously. And apologies, Mike, because I know you've described this to me before and on previous podcasts. It was a long time ago. I definitely can't remember. But it makes sense to combine this with a group setting as well, doesn't it? In terms of the variety and everything, because you're not going to be able to track all this stuff, but you're delivering this really nice, novel experience, which is another key thing. I know mostly here we're talking about the objective measure, increasing muscle mass and lean tissue. But the reality is that clients love it when there's novelty in the workout experience. And this is full of that. I mean, some people might hear this and think, oh, but there's so much novelty that it's just completely chaotic and you can't really measure anything. And it's like, well, again, this is a short-term approach, and you bear that in mind. So,
well, I'll even challenge that a little bit. I mean, first, I'll concur with you that everything that we've been describing on this podcast, is how we've created our group offering. So I am probably less apt to do this with somebody right now. Also, just because, again, the time commitment for doing something like this, again, I'm far more apt to do this for myself. But the concept behind it is exactly how we've built our group offering. And it's looking at it through that lens of how demanding is this particular type of routine that we do compared to this one, and how do we stack these together so that over the life cycle of a client, it's not just stress all the way through. It could be like stress, slightly lower demands, stress.
So you almost periodize the programming a little bit.
Correct.
Got it. Yeah.
We even for a long time we used to have a chart behind the desk of our studio, just so everybody could see, what routine was coming up next and where that fell along the spectrum.
Okay.
Like, we knew that certain routines lend themselves really well. Like, for example, right now we are in the midst of a drop set routine. So every single exercise we do is like a triple drop set. But what's interesting is that for many clients, I mean, all we've been hearing is, oh my gosh, I feel my muscles so much more on this than what we were doing the week before. Oh my gosh, I've never felt my muscles this much in an exercise, right? And it's still the same exercise delivered in a different manner, but it's a completely different feel. And we know that certain workout routines tend to feel more metabolically demanding on us. I mean, I think just of a very typical high intensity, one set to failure, rush factor employed type of workout leaves you crushed and on the floor quivering. Yet at the same time, you don't necessarily feel your muscles as well as you do if in that same amount of time you did a zone training workout.
Yeah.
And that's what we personally are trying to provide to our clients is a different experience when they come in, but still in alignment with this brief, frequent, intense training routine that we know is going to ultimately, right? Because if they stick around long enough, what was the study, like the study that showed that there's no such thing as zero results from a resistance training?
No such thing as non-responders, is it?
Yeah, there's no such thing as a non-responder. Well, we know that as long as we keep delivering, adequate stimuluses each time this person shows up, and we keep them around for a long period of time, they are going to increase in strength. They are going to improve their musculature. They're going to improve their functionality. And the other point I want to make is in terms of being able to measure that, well, two ways. The first way, and probably the most important, is what is the feedback we're getting from them, which is, oh, I'm capable of doing this now, which I couldn't do before. They don't care necessarily that they are lifting 10, 20, 30 more pounds than they used to. I mean, if you tell them that, they're like, oh, cool, that's awesome. I'm happy to know that. But really where it shows up and where it's most important for them is in their daily living. But number two, what we had been doing for a very long time with a lot of our group trainees is we would set aside every several weeks, I think it was like every 8 weeks, we would have a testing day. And what we would do is we would sell it as, or let them use an additional training session from their package. And 15 minutes before they came in to do their workout that day, we would take them through the same 5 exercises in the same order that we had tested them previously. And we could use that as our means of showing that difference, that improvement, on paper. So even though we weren't recording all of their group training workouts, it's like we just recorded a standardized workout and was able to use that. And there were times that we saw, after certain routines, there was always a drop off. And then after others, people always seem to improve collectively, not just individuals, but collectively. And that led us to think about how we were structuring some of our training routines. It was really helpful in terms of that periodization of figuring out like, hey, we should never really back up these two types of routines because that may be too stressful. And, there was some surprising stuff that came about from that. And so I'm not obviously, against measuring for group people, but you just have to go about it in a different way, separate it out from the routine.
Got it. Yeah, I'd love to see some of those routines, Mike. I know it's probably all top secret franchise stuff, but one day. I'm just conscious of time. When's your hard stop? Do you have a few more minutes? Just one more question to wrap up. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm absolutely okay right now.
Cool. Something I'm really curious about. I literally just published an episode today with Dr. Ted Naiman on fat loss, and he got me thinking, and I was going to say convinced. I'm always try and be skeptical about all these things, and I'm still reviewing some of the evidence that he talked about on that podcast. But he made me realize that I may have been really downplaying the value of strength training as it pertains to fat loss. Certain things I perhaps don't really or didn't really know, to be completely honest, and haven't really explained to clients, is how powerful the satiety effect of strength training can be, and not just strength training, cardio for that matter, apparently, and how actually more activity will help with fat loss. For the longest time, Doug has mentioned on my podcast and others that he does believe that more activity leads to more fat loss, not necessarily through a simplification of calories in, calories out, but for a more marginal utility way of looking at the utility of stored body fat. If you're moving a lot, it's not as valuable. And I'm wondering, with your clients, because they train hard 3 times a week, do you see real improvements in fat loss as a result of that increased frequency? Because my thinking is you would, but I'm just curious what your experience has been with that.
I think the answer to this is very nuanced. And I say that because I can't say broadly that I notice a dramatic difference in everything in terms of fat loss. I mean, without addressing the nutritional component,
sure,
everybody still winds up stuck, and that's that. There are certain individuals who, I think of a client right now who I've been working with for the past several months, who, was never really terrible with her nutrition. And because of that, she hasn't really changed much about it. Yet we were noting just yesterday how dramatically different she looks and, how leaner she has become. So and all she does is 2 workouts a week. She comes in for 2 training sessions each week. And so for somebody like that, okay, I could definitely point to the resistance training as having had a major impact on her fat loss. But then there's other people who might be training upwards of 3 times a week, but they're so disrupted hormonally because of the foods that they've been eating, that the increase in muscle development only creates a marginal improvement. And one of the main reasons why, I've gone down this road of focusing so heavily on nutrition with everybody is because, I was guilty of being that high intensity practitioner who had people coming in for the purpose of wanting to be leaner, wanting to, just simply look better, lose some weight. And after several months of training, just barely made a dent. And it's because they didn't change anything about their nutrition. So I don't think that for the majority of people, I personally, at least in my experience, my observation, resistance training, yes, absolutely makes a difference in fat loss, but I don't believe it makes a significant difference.
Okay.
And unless it is really helping somebody to, again, turn the dial on their hormones. And like this was the missing component, was improved strength and muscle development. I think for the majority, it still comes down to nutrition.
It's so interesting. There's so much nuance. Like, you what you said is aligned quite closely with what Tim Ryan said. And Tim Ryan's podcast, which is about the fundamentals of HIIT, we talk about just fat loss. That comes out next week. So I've done a lot of fat loss stuff lately. Whereas Ted is really kind of, I know this is really simplistic and probably not the best way of looking at it, but he was saying like it's 50-50, 50% strength training and exercise and 50% diet. Whereas Tim's like 90% diet, 10% exercise. And I think you probably align more with Tim, right?
Yeah. I would be more in agreement with Tim, but listen, this is the other aspect of this, right? What type of exercise? That's the big determinant. So, if somebody's coming from that standpoint of, well, it's 50-50, well, show me the 50 that you're doing. Show me the 50% exercise that you're doing, and then I'll make a decision as to whether or not I really think that that's the case. Because, that's the approach that they take on The Biggest Loser, right? Like 50% starvation, 50% let's just absolutely crush you with mind-numbing workouts and watch you lose weight. But it winds up crushing people hormonally. So what's the benefit when they're?
I'm not saying like Ted's advocating that kind of Biggest Loser approach.
No, I understand. And I'm not insinuating that he is, but all I'm saying is that I really do not believe if somebody is engaged in a proper strength training program, that it is appropriately balanced, that it puts them in a position where they are maximizing or near maximizing their muscle mass. They're reaping all of the hormonal benefits that come from the training. There's not much more you're going to do beyond that with exercise, unless you are doing like mass amounts of cardio or other activity that just puts you in that place where, your body has no choice but to burn through more fat because there's just such a discrepancy between your output and your input. Mm-hmm. And I'm definitely not the calories in, calories out guy. I mean, I probably fall more on the hormonal spectrum when it comes to fat loss and understanding how to approach it. But it would be naive to say that calories in and calories out don't matter. It's energy in and energy out, but that is mostly regulated through your hormones.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate that. I know I took us a little bit off track on that one, but I just really value and was interested in your insights on that because it's very kind of top of mind for me. Mike, this has been great. Just obviously conscious of time here. So before we just wrap up, obviously you and I have been collaborating on promoting the International Association of Resistance Trainers and the IART courses. And for those who aren't aware, the IART is a higher online education to help offer an individualized and creative personal training service to help you grow your fitness business. The this is an organization or product that Mike has owned for some time. And I've been working with Mike to help promote that out to you guys in terms of helping develop yourself as a personal trainer and your team to deliver more nuanced workouts approaches to your clients. And obviously some of that we touched on today. A lot of what Mike spoke about regarding his approach to bodybuilding is heavily influenced by the IART, and Brian Johnston. So Mike, do you want to just give a little bit of information on the courses, what people can expect, and then we'll drop a URL in there too?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the courses are intended to really push the boundaries of your thinking. So everything is very much grounded in high intensity training principles, but a lot of what we discussed today, as you mentioned, has come out of that course. A lot of what we personally do at Pure Physique and the way we've been able to structure our program comes directly out of what I've learned from the IART. And again, with everything being grounded in science, it's just simply taking it to that next level of thinking about and then being able to practically apply what you know in a way that is maybe unique or different from the way that you're currently training. And so, for myself, for many others who have been through the organization, we really believe in being active-minded. And that's what this course helps to provide is an active mindset with regards to how you approach and think about resistance training in particular. The course is designed in 2 levels. So our level 1 is the introductory phase, where we are taking people, through some of the basic HIIT principles, but then asking them to be able to rationalize their application. So this is not going to be a certification in which we tell you this is the way to do it. It's going to be a certification in which we challenge you to explain the way that you do it and why you do it that way. And then taking that from there into the level 2 course, this is where we are doing a scientific case study. And I feel that this just alone, for me personally, was a major benefit, because going through the actual scientific process of doing an actual case study, not just a write-up on a before and after, but actually having to think through all of the steps prior to hypothesizing what the approach is going to be with this particular individual, and then laying that out in scientific detail. It's such a great experience, because it takes your learning to a different level. And I feel that for many, it helps you think differently, just even in the midst of your daily training of clients. So for those reasons, I believe that these courses are timeless. The principles in them are timeless, but I think more importantly that it's going to help each individual better individualize their training for their clients.
Awesome. Yeah. And I was just thinking you could do a blitz program for your case study, right? So it's just an excuse to destroy yourself and get those gains. And I think it perhaps important to mention, you might want to correct me here, Mike, but the courses probably aren't for beginners. It's more of an advanced personal training course. If you're a total beginner coming into HIIT, you might want to start with something like HIIT Uni, which is a bit more fundamental. And then this is perhaps a little bit more advanced after you've got some understanding of HIIT. Is that fair enough?
That is entirely 100% fair.
Awesome. Okay. And if you're interested in those courses, please go to highintensitybusiness.com/IART. And there'll also be a link over on the show notes for this podcast. And to find the blog posts and show notes for this podcast and download a free sales presentation on aging and strength training to help you grow your business, please go to highintensitybusiness.com and search for episode 380 free. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. This episode is brought to you by Strength Portal. You need a single software platform that enables your trainers to deliver consistent, high-quality workouts, track client progress, and scale your business. The problem is you're still using pen and paper or basic spreadsheets to run your business, which leads to poor client experiences, inaccurate tracking, and prevents you from growing your business, making you feel frustrated. Strength Portal understand your challenge and have worked closely with the HIIT industry to create a software platform to manage and scale your niche business. You can integrate with MindBody, manage a standardized exercise and workout library for your team, track workouts effectively, and produce client reports at the click of a button. Strength Portal is used by multiple businesses in the high-intensity strength training community, namely Discover Strength, Smart Strength Austin, MedX Precision Fitness, and more. Starting with Strength Portal is super simple. Number 1, sign up for the best package for your business. Number 2, let Strength Portal take the load off and help onboard your business onto the platform. And number 3, start delivering consistent workout experiences and scale your business to the next level. To help support the podcast, please go to strengthportal.com/high intensity business and sign up now so you can stop feeling frustrated about your business and start to scale your business to its true potential. Go to strengthportal.com/high intensity business.
Let's go.